Welcome to today's episode of Origins Unveiled, where we dive deep into the extraordinary stories that shaped humanity. Picture this. 70,000 years ago, a small band of humans stands at the edge of Africa, gazing across the Red Sea toward an unknown world. They don't know it yet, but they are about to embark on the greatest adventure in human history, one that will scatter their descendants across every corner of our planet and give birth to the incredible diversity of cultures we see today. These weren't the first humans to leave Africa, but they were different. Something had changed in their minds, a cognitive revolution that gave them abilities no species had ever possessed. They could imagine things that didn't exist, tell stories about the future, and most remarkably, cooperate with complete strangers based on shared myths and beliefs. From that pivotal moment, humanity would fracture and merge, adapt and innovate, creating distinct cultures shaped by ice ages and deserts, mountains and seas. Some would paint magnificent caves, others would master the art of seafaring. Some would develop complex languages with thousands of words. Others would communicate through intricate sand drawings that lasted only moments. How did one species become so gloriously diverse? How did environment, climate, and chance encounters shape not just what we looked like, but how we thought, what we believed, and how we saw the world? Join us as we unravel the epic saga of how early humans split into the rich tapestry of cultures that define our world today. Chapter 1. The Great Departure. The story begins in Africa, around 300,000 years ago, with the emergence of anatomically modern humans. You're looking at people who would blend seamlessly into a modern crowd. Same height, same brain size, same fundamental physical features. But for the first 200,000 years of their existence, they remained confined to the African continent. Their potential locked away by limitations we're only beginning to understand. To truly appreciate the magnitude of what was about to unfold, we must first understand the Africa these early humans inhabited. This wasn't the Africa of today's political boundaries or modern climate patterns. During the late Pleistocene, the continent experienced dramatic environmental fluctuations that created a complex mosaic of opportunities and challenges. The Sahara Desert, now Earth's largest hot desert, periodically transformed into a green savanna dotted with lakes and rivers during what scientists call African humid periods. These cyclical changes, driven by shifts in Earth's orbital patterns, created corridors of opportunity that alternately opened and closed migration routes between different regions of Africa. Archaeological sites across Africa reveal that early human populations were already remarkably sophisticated during this period. At Katanga in the Democratic Republic of Congo, researchers have discovered elaborately barbed bone harpoons dating to 90,000 years ago, indicating that these populations had developed complex fishing technologies and were systematically exploiting aquatic resources. The precision required to craft these implements suggests not just individual skill, but cultural traditions capable of transmitting complex technical knowledge across generations. The Blombos cave site in South Africa has yielded perhaps the most compelling evidence of early human cognitive sophistication. Beyond the famous engraved ochre pieces, archaeologists have uncovered a complete toolkit for producing complex pigments. They found abalone shells used as paint containers, bone tools for mixing colors, and evidence that these early artists were combining different minerals to create specific hues. This wasn't random experimentation. It was systematic color production that required understanding of chemistry, planning, and aesthetic sensibility. The archaeological site of Jebel Faya in the United Arab Emirates tells a fascinating story. Buried beneath 125,000 years of sediment, archaeologists have uncovered sophisticated stone tools that shouldn't exist according to traditional timelines. These aren't crude implements. They are beautifully crafted artifacts that speak of minds, capable of complex planning and abstract thought. Yet they're too old. too advanced, and in the wrong place, according to conventional theories. Multiple waves of early humans had attempted to leave Africa before the Great Departure. Sites like Kafsa and Skull in Israel contain human remains dating back 100,000 years, proving that anatomically modern humans had ventured beyond Africa's borders. But these early immigrants seemed to struggle, their populations eventually disappearing or retreating back to their ancestral homeland. What made the exodus around 70,000 years ago different wasn't just timing. It was what was happening inside the human mind. Genetic analysis reveals that all non-African populations today descend from a founding group of perhaps only 1,000 to 10,000 individuals who left Africa during this critical period. This genetic bottleneck has left its signature in our DNA, creating patterns that geneticists can read like a roadmap of ancient migrations. The route they took remains debated among scientists. Traditional models suggested a northern path through the Sinai Peninsula into the Middle East, but mounting evidence points to a southern route across the narrow strait between the Horn of Africa and southern Arabia, a journey of perhaps 20 kilometers across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait during periods of dramatically lowered sea levels. Climate data reveals why this timing was crucial. Around 70,000 years ago, the world was entering a glacial period that would lower sea levels by up to 140 meters, creating land bridges and coastal routes that don't exist today. The Arabian Peninsula, now one of Earth's most arid regions, experienced periods of increased rainfall that created green corridors dotted with freshwater lakes. Satellite imagery has revealed the ghost outlines of ancient river systems that once flowed across the peninsula, providing the water and wildlife necessary to sustain migrating populations. These immigrants weren't just lucky survivors, they were prepared. Archaeological evidence suggests they had developed revolutionary hunting strategies, sophisticated tool-making techniques, and most importantly, cognitive abilities that enabled long-term planning and unprecedented social cooperation. Unlike their predecessors, they could envision destinations beyond the horizon and coordinate complex group efforts across vast distances. The genetic consequences of this migration continue to influence human populations today. When groups become geographically separated for thousands of years, they begin evolving independently, accumulating different mutations and developing distinct genetic profiles. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA genetic material passed unchanged from mother to daughter has revealed the branching pattern of human populations as they spread across the globe. The deepest divisions in the human genetic tree separate African populations from all others, confirming Africa as humanity's birthplace. But the patterns within non-African populations tell an equally fascinating story of rapid expansion and adaptation. Each major geographic region shows evidence of founder effects, population bottlenecks, and subsequent expansion that created the genetic diversity we observe today. The success of this migration had profound cultural implications. For the first time in our species' history, humans possessed the mental tools necessary not just to survive in new environments, but to actively transform them through technology and social organization. They understood fire not merely as a source of warmth and protection, but as a landscape management tool that could create hunting grounds and clear pathways. They had developed sophisticated hunting strategies that allowed small groups to bring down massive prey species, providing the protein necessary to sustain expanding populations during long migrations. Most crucially, they possessed something their predecessors lacked: the ability to maintain cultural traditions across generations and vast distances. This cultural continuity meant that innovations developed by one group could spread to others, creating a cumulative effect that accelerated technological and social development. The archaeological record from this period shows evidence of increasingly sophisticated toolkits, including composite implements made from multiple materials combined in complex ways. Afted spear points required not just individual skill, but cultural transmission of intricate manufacturing techniques. The production of these tools demanded planning, resource management, and social cooperation that went far beyond anything seen in earlier human populations. Perhaps most significantly, these early immigrants carried with them the cognitive revolution that would define modern human culture. They could think symbolically, create abstract art, and most remarkably, develop shared beliefs about things that existed only in their collective imagination. This capacity for shared fiction enabled new forms of cooperation that could unite large groups of unrelated individuals around common goals and values. The journey out of Africa wasn't a single event, but a process that likely took thousands of years and involved multiple groups following different routes and strategies. Some populations may have followed coastal routes, exploiting marine resources and developing maritime technologies. Others may have tracked inland river systems, developing specialized knowledge of seasonal flooding patterns and freshwater resources. The success of this great departure established patterns of human migration and settlement that would characterize our species for the next 70,000 years. The combination of advanced cognitive abilities, sophisticated technology, and flexible social organization created a template for human expansion that enabled our ancestors to colonize virtually every environment on Earth. As these populations spread beyond Arabia into South Asia and beyond, they carried with them not just their genes and technologies, but the cultural innovations that would make their global success possible. The Great Departure from Africa marked not just a geographic expansion, but the beginning of humanity as transformation from a regional African species into a global phenomenon that would reshape the entire planet. Chapter 2: Crossing Impossible Waters. Imagine standing on the ancient coastline of Timor 50,000 years ago, gazing across an impossible expanse of ocean. Even during the Ice Ages, when sea levels dropped by 140 meters, Australia remained separated from Asia by at least 90 kilometers of open water. No land mammal had ever crossed this barrier. The Wallace Line, as biologists call it, marked an absolute boundary in the natural world until humans arrived. The challenge of crossing to Australia wasn't just about distance. It was about navigating some of the world's most treacherous waters. The Indonesian archipelago sits at the intersection of major oceanic systems, where the Pacific, Indian, and Southern Ocean currents create complex patterns of tides, currents, and seasonal weather that challenge even modern mariners. Ancient seafarers would have had to understand not just basic navigation, but complex oceanographic patterns that required generations of accumulated knowledge. Recent oceanographic modeling has revealed just how sophisticated these early mariners must have been. Computer simulations show that successful crossings would have required timing departures with specific seasonal wind patterns, understanding current flows that could either assist or impede progress, and maintaining course accuracy within narrow margins over distances where land was invisible beyond the horizon. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. A miscalculation of just a few degrees could mean missing the target landmass entirely. Archaeological evidence suggests that the first Australians weren't just lucky survivors of accidental drift voyages. The diversity of early Australian sites indicates that multiple groups arrived over a period of several thousand years, each bringing slightly different technological traditions and cultural practices. This pattern suggests systematic exploration and colonization rather than random dispersal. The genetic evidence tells an equally fascinating story of careful planning and cultural continuity. DNA analysis reveals that despite the small founding population, early Australians maintained sufficient genetic diversity to establish viable communities across the continent. This suggests that the initial crossings involved carefully planned expeditions that included adequate numbers of both men and women of reproductive Asia level of social organization and forward planning that speaks to sophisticated cultural institutions. At the Majebi rock shelter in northern Australia, archaeologists have uncovered evidence that transforms our understanding of human maritime capabilities. The artifacts here date back at least 55,000 years, including stone tools crafted from local materials, evidence of controlled fire use, and the remains of animals that early Australians had never encountered before. These weren't accidental castaways. They were intentional colonizers who came prepared for a new world. The magnitude of this achievement becomes clear when you consider the logistics. Computer simulations reveal that even under the most favorable conditions, calm seas, minimal winds, and the shortest possible crossing, the journey would have required 8 to 12 hours using primitive watercraft. The minimum viable population for successful colonization would have demanded multiple boats carrying dozens of individuals, including men and women of reproductive age. Recent experimental archaeology has tested the possibilities. Researchers have constructed bamboo rafts and bark boats using only materials available to ancient peoples. While primitive by modern standards, these vessels proved capable of ocean crossings when handled by experienced sailors. The key insight is that these early mariners weren't just brave. They were skilled navigators who understood currents, winds, and seasonal patterns. The decision to attempt such crossings required cognitive abilities that set humans apart from all other species. They had to conceptualize distant goals, plan for contingencies, and coordinate group efforts on an unprecedented scale. Most remarkably, they possessed sufficient confidence in their abilities to risk everything on what must have seemed like an impossible venture. Genetic analysis reveals that this wasn't a single crossing but a complex migration, involving multiple groups over thousands of years. The founding population was small but genetically diverse, suggesting it drew from different Southeast Asian populations. The pattern of genetic diversity also indicates that once they reached Australia, these populations spread rapidly across the continent, reaching the southern coast within a few thousand years. The immediate aftermath of colonization demonstrates the remarkable adaptability that characterized these early humans. Within millennia, they had spread across environments ranging from tropical rainforests to arid deserts, from mountain highlands to coastal plains. Each environment demanded innovative solutions that were developed with stunning speed. In the tropical north, they mastered techniques for processing toxic plants, transforming potentially deadly foods into dietary staples. Archaeological sites reveal complex food preparation methods, including earth ovens and leaching pits that could remove harmful compounds from nuts and tubers. These weren't simple survival strategies. They represented sophisticated understanding of plant, chemistry, and food processing that required generations to perfect. In the arid interior, they developed what may be humanity's most impressive environmental adaptation: the ability to find water in seemingly barren landscapes. Traditional Aboriginal knowledge includes detailed understanding of seasonal patterns, hidden springs, and underground water sources that sustain communities across continental distances. This knowledge was encoded in complex navigational systems that integrated practical information with spiritual beliefs. Perhaps most significantly, early Australians developed the world's first systematic approach to landscape management through controlled burning. This wasn't random fire setting, but sophisticated ecological engineering that increased land productivity and created favorable hunting conditions. The practice was so widespread and systematic that it literally reshaped the Australian continent, promoting fire-adapted species and creating the open woodlands that characterized much of the interior. Archaeological evidence reveals that by 40,000 years ago, Australian populations had developed complex art traditions, including both rock art and portable decorated objects. The Gumtree Valley site has yielded carved emu eggshells with intricate geometric patterns that demonstrate sophisticated planning and aesthetic sensibilities. These artistic traditions weren't merely decorative. They were integral to complex social and spiritual systems that maintained cultural continuity across vast distances. The Aboriginal concept of the Dreamtime, while impossible to date directly, likely has roots in these earliest cultural systems. This sophisticated cosmology integrated practical environmental knowledge with spiritual beliefs and social organization, creating a framework that maintained cultural coherence across thousands of years and hundreds of distinct groups. The development of unique hunting technologies showcased human ingenuity in action. The boomerang, perhaps Australia's most famous invention, existed in multiple forms adapted to different purposes. Hunting sticks could bring down birds and small game, while larger returning boomerangs served ceremonial functions. The woomera, or spear thrower, multiplied the force and accuracy of projectile weapons, enabling hunters to take prey at distances that would be impossible with hand-thrown spears. Social innovations were equally impressive. Aboriginal societies developed sharing systems that could redistribute resources across entire regions, ensuring that successful hunting or gathering in one area benefited extended networks of related groups. These reciprocal relationships created social safety nets that enabled survival during droughts, floods, and other environmental challenges. The rapid diversification of Australian populations led to extraordinary linguistic diversity. At the time of European contact, Australia contained over 250 distinct languages organized into approximately 28 language families. This diversity rivaled that of entire continents, reflecting both the continent's geographic complexity and the long period of independent cultural development. Trade networks emerged that connected populations across continental distances. Shell ornaments from northern coasts have been found in central Australian sites, thousands of kilometers from the ocean. Specialized stone tools made from particular rock sources were traded across regional networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. These exchange systems weren't just economic, they maintained social connections and cultural ties that prevented population isolation. The success of Australian colonization had profound implications for human cultural evolution. For the first time, a human population had become completely isolated from the rest of humanity for tens of thousands of years. This isolation allowed the development of unique cultural traditions, technologies, and even genetic adaptations that distinguished Aboriginal Australians from all other human populations. The Australian experience demonstrated that geographic isolation could become a powerful driver of cultural innovation. Cut off from technological and cultural developments occurring elsewhere, Aboriginal Australians developed distinctive solutions to universal human challenges. Their sustainable land management practices, sophisticated kinship systems, and integrated spiritual practical knowledge systems represent alternative approaches to human social organization that developed independently from old world traditions. When European colonization began in 1788, Aboriginal Australians had created what may have been the world's most sustainable human society. For over 50,000 years, they had maintained population levels that didn't exceed environmental carrying capacity, developed technologies that enhanced rather than degraded ecosystem productivity, and created cultural institutions that preserved knowledge across countless generations. The colonization of Australia marked humanity's first great maritime achievement, but it was far more than a technological milestone. It demonstrated the full flowering of human cognitive abilities, social cooperation, and cultural creativity that would enable our species to colonize every environment on Earth. Chapter 3. The Ice Age Wanderers. The Grotte de Fontagaume in southwestern France contains within its limestone chambers one of humanity's most extraordinary achievements, paintings that have remained vivid and powerful for over 17,000 years. But these aren't merely artistic masterpieces. They read windows into the minds of people who lived through one of the most challenging periods in human history, when glaciers covered much of northern Europe and survival required innovations that would reshape human culture forever. Standing in these caves today, you realize the profound transformation that occurred when humans first adapted to truly cold climates. This wasn't the warm savanna of Africa or the tropical coasts of Southeast Asia. This was a world of permafrost and tundra, where winter temperatures could plummet to -30 degrees Celsius and snow might persist for 8 months of the year. The scale of the environmental challenge becomes clear when you examine paleoclimatic data from this period. Ice core samples from Greenland reveal that Ice Age Europe experienced not just cold temperatures, but dramatic climate instability. Temperatures could shift by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius within decades, creating conditions where populations had to be prepared for rapid environmental change. These weren't gradual adaptations occurring over millennia. They were crisis responses that had to be developed within generations or face extinction. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed just how sophisticated Ice Age European cultures became in response to these challenges. At Pavlov, in the Czech Republic, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of ceramic production dating to 29,000 years ago, among the earliest known ceramics in the world. But these weren't simple pottery vessels for cooking or storage. They were carefully crafted figurines, including the famous Venus sculptures found across Europe. The technology required to fire ceramics in Ice Age conditions was extraordinarily complex, requiring controlled temperatures and specialized kiln construction in environments where fuel was scarce and valuable. The social innovations required for Ice Age survival were equally remarkable. Archaeological evidence from sites like Malta in Siberia reveals complex settlement patterns where different specialized groups occupied the same territory at different times of year. Some groups specialized in mammoth hunting during autumn migrations, others focused on reindeer hunting during spring movements, and still others concentrated on fur-bearing animals during winter months. Coordinating these activities required sophisticated communication systems and social institutions that could maintain cooperation across multiple groups and seasonal cycles. When modern humans first entered Europe around 45,000 years ago, they encountered a landscape that resembled modern Siberia more than today's temperate forests. During the last glacial maximum, approximately 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, ice sheets extended from Scandinavia to northern Germany and from the British Isles deep into the Russian steppes. This was mammoth country, vast expanses of tundra and steppe populated by cold-adapted megafauna, including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, cave bears, and massive herds of reindeer. The humans who colonized this harsh environment weren't the first to arrive. Neanderthals had been thriving in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, having evolved sophisticated cold adaptations, including robust body builds designed for heat conservation, large nasal cavities for warming frigid air, and complex hunting strategies perfectly suited to Ice Age prey. When modern humans arrived, they initially coexisted with Neanderthal populations, and genetic evidence suggests they occasionally intermarried. However, within 10,000 years of modern human arrival, Neanderthal populations had vanished entirely. What gave the newcomers such a decisive advantage? The answer lies in a remarkable explosion of technological and cultural innovation that would define human civilization for millennia to come. The toolkits developed by European Ice Age populations were revolutionary in their sophistication and diversity. Archaeological sites reveal specialized hunting weapons designed for different prey species and environmental conditions. The Epilogue, or spear thrower, multiplied the force and accuracy of projectile weapons, allowing hunters to bring down massive prey from safe distances. Hide needles made from bone enabled the creation of tailored clothing, not just animal hides draped over the body, but precisely fitted garments essential for surviving sub-Arctic conditions. Perhaps most impressive were the systematic approaches to shelter construction. Sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic reveal elaborate structures built from mammoth bones and hides, featuring sophisticated hearth systems that could efficiently heat large interior spaces. These weren't temporary camps, but complex residential sites requiring coordinated group effort to construct and maintain. A single mammoth bone house might use the remains of dozens of animals and represent hundreds of hours of collective labor. The social organization required for Ice Age survival fostered unprecedented levels of cooperation and cultural transmission. Hunting massive prey like mammoths demanded coordinated group efforts, involving dozens of individuals with specialized role sets to locate herds, strategists to plan approaches, skilled hunters to make kills, and specialists to process carcasses. Archaeological evidence suggests successful hunts were followed by elaborate feasts that reinforced social bonds and provided opportunities for sharing critical information about hunting grounds, weather patterns, and resource locations. These social gatherings likely catalyzed the remarkable artistic flowering that characterized European Ice Age culture. The cave paintings of France and Spain represent just the most visible aspects of a complex symbolic system that included portable art objects, musical instruments, and elaborate burial practices. At sites like Sungir in Russia, archaeologists have uncovered burials containing thousands of ivory beads and other grave goods, representing hundreds of hours of meticulous craftsmanship. The cognitive demands of Ice Age survival may have accelerated human cultural evolution in ways that continue to influence modern behavior. Surviving winter and subarctic conditions required extraordinary long-term planning, abstract thinking about seasonal cycles, and the ability to maintain complex mental maps of resource locations across vast territories. Some groups maintained seasonal migration circuits covering hundreds of kilometers, demanding sophisticated navigation skills and cultural mechanisms for preserving geographic knowledge across generations. Musical instruments from this period reveal sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles and precise craftsmanship. Bone flutes from European sites dating to 40,000 years ago represent some of humanity's earliest musical instruments. The social context in which such instruments were used suggests complex ceremonial and cultural practices that went far beyond immediate survival needs. The genetic legacy of European Ice Age populations provides additional insights into their survival strategies. Analysis of ancient DNA from sites like Kostenki in Russia reveals that European populations underwent significant demographic fluctuations during the Ice Age, with periods of expansion followed by severe population bottlenecks during particularly harsh climate events. Survival required not just technological innovation, but social strategies for maintaining viable population sizes during environmental crises. The artistic achievements of this period established aesthetic principles and symbolic systems that would influence European culture for tens of thousands of years. The Lascaux Cave Complex in France, discovered in 1940, contains over 600 painted animals and nearly 1,500 engravings created around 17,000 years ago. The sophistication of these works, their use of natural rock contours to create three-dimensional effects, their dynamic composition suggesting movement and narrative reveals artistic sensibilities that rival any historical period. But Ice Age art wasn't merely aesthetic expression. Recent research has revealed that many cave art sites were located in chambers with exceptional acoustic properties, where sounds echo and reverberate in complex ways. This suggests that artistic expression was intimately connected with vocal and musical traditions, creating multimedia experiences that integrated visual, auditory, and social elements. The technologies developed during the European Ice Age provided foundations for later innovations. Techniques for working bone, antler, and ivory led to increasingly sophisticated tools and weapons. Methods for preserving and storing food enabled survival through harsh winters. Construction techniques for cold weather shelters influenced architectural traditions that persisted long after the ice sheets retreated. Perhaps most significantly, the European Ice Age experience demonstrated that humans could not only survive in extreme environments but use environmental challenges as catalysts for cultural creativity and innovation. The harsh conditions that might have overwhelmed earlier human populations became the crucible in which some of our species' most remarkable achievements were forged. The social structures developed during this period, complex hunting cooperatives, resource-sharing networks, and ceremonial institutions, created templates for human organization that would influence subsequent developments in agriculture, urbanization, and state formation. The ability to maintain cultural traditions across generations and geographic distances, essential for Ice Age survival, became a defining characteristic of human societies worldwide. When the ice sheets began retreating, around 15,000 years ago, the populations that had survived Europe's most challenging period possessed technologies, social institutions, and cultural traditions that would shape the continent's development for millennia. Their descendants would become the farmers who introduced agriculture to Europe, the craftspeople who developed metallurgy, and the navigators who explored Atlantic waters. The Ice Age wanderers proved that human adaptability had no environmental limits. They had taken a species adapted for African savannas and tropical coastlines and transformed it into masters of frozen landscapes, creating in the process some of humanity's most enduring cultural achievements. Chapter 4: Rivers of Life. At the confluence of the Yangtze and Han rivers in modern China, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of humanity's most transformative innovation, the deliberate cultivation of rice. The Bashidang site, dating to over 11,000 years ago, contains pottery shards bearing rice, husk impressions revealing that early farmers weren't just gathering wild grains, but systematically cultivating them in ways that required sophisticated understanding of plant biology and seasonal coordination. This discovery represents far more than agricultural innovation. It reveals how rivers became the arteries of human civilization, providing not just water and fertile soil, but the foundation for entirely new ways of organizing society. From the Nile to the Indus, from the Tigris-Euphrates to the Yellow River, humanity's greatest cultural achievements emerged along riverbanks where seasonal floods deposited rich sediments and predictable water sources enabled settled life. The transformation from mobile hunter-gatherer societies to settled agricultural communities didn't happen gradually. It was revolutionary, occurring over just a few centuries in multiple river valleys around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. This timing coincided with the early Holocene period, when global climate was stabilizing after the last ice age, creating the consistent seasonal patterns that made agriculture possible. The process of rice domestication reveals the sophisticated plant biology knowledge that early farmers developed. Wild rice shatters easily when ripe, scattering seeds before they can be harvested. Domestic rice retains its seeds on the plant, making harvesting efficient but rendering the plant completely dependent on human intervention for reproduction. This coevolutionary relationship between humans and crops created the foundation for agricultural societies and fundamentally altered human cultural development. Similar innovations were occurring simultaneously in other river valleys. Along the Indus River in modern Pakistan and northwestern India, populations were developing water management systems that would support some of the world's first urban centers. The Harappan civilization that emerged here around 5,000 years ago featured precisely planned cities with advanced sewage systems, standardized weights and measures, and trade networks extending from Central Asia to the Arabian Peninsula. The engineering achievements required for river valley agriculture went far beyond simple farming. Managing seasonal floods demanded sophisticated understanding of hydrology and construction capabilities that could build dikes, canals, and irrigation systems. Archaeological evidence from Mehrgarh in Pakistan reveals that by 7,000 years ago, Indus Valley populations had developed complex water management systems including wells, dams, and drainage networks capable of handling massive seasonal variations in river flow. These engineering projects required unprecedented social coordination. Unlike hunting and gathering, which could be performed by small autonomous groups, river valley agriculture demanded community-wide cooperation for constructing irrigation systems, coordinating planting schedules, and managing water distribution during floods and droughts. This necessity fostered development of social hierarchies, specialized craft production, and ultimately, the world's first urban centers. The cultural implications were equally profound. For the first time in human history, populations could accumulate food surpluses, freeing individuals from direct food production, and enabling specialized crafts, trade networks, and complex social institutions. Archaeological sites reveal evidence of pottery production, metallurgy, and textile manufacture that required years of training to master. Writing systems emerged directly from river valley civilizations and their need to manage complex agricultural and trading networks. The earliest known writing appeared in Mesopotamia around 5,200 years ago, initially for recording agricultural transactions and inventory management. Similar systems developed independently in China, the Indus Valley, and Egypt, each adapted to specific administrative needs of river-based societies. Trade networks developing along river systems created humanity's first international connections. Rivers provided natural highways for moving people and goods across vast distances, connecting highland resource areas with lowland agricultural centers. Archaeological evidence reveals trade networks extending thousands of kilometers, carrying exotic goods, technological innovations, and cultural practices between distant populations. The religious and cultural systems emerging in river valleys reflected water's central importance in human life. Early mythologies incorporated river gods, flood narratives, and seasonal ceremonies coordinating religious observance with agricultural activities. These belief systems provided social cohesion and cultural continuity, helping river valley societies maintain stability across generations and centuries. In China, the Yellow River became known as China's Sorrow due to its tendency to flood catastrophically, but also as the cradle of Chinese civilization. The river's seasonal deposits of fertile loess soil enabled intensive millet cultivation that supported increasingly dense populations. Archaeological sites along the Yellow River reveal the development of complex pottery traditions, sophisticated bronze working techniques, and early forms of Chinese writing that would influence East Asian culture for millennia. The Mesopotamian rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, supported perhaps the world's first true cities. Ur, Babylon, and other Mesopotamian centers developed urban planning principles, legal systems, and administrative structures that became templates for subsequent civilizations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's earliest literary works, emerged from this river valley culture and deals with themes that remain central to human experience: friendship, mortality, and the relationship between civilization and nature. Egypt's relationship with the Nile created perhaps history's most stable river valley civilization. The river's predictable annual floods enabled agricultural planning that supported continuous occupation for over 3,000 years. Egyptian innovations in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering emerged from practical needs of managing river-based agriculture and constructing monumental architecture in flood-prone environments. The demographic changes associated with river valley settlement were unprecedented. Agricultural populations could support densities 10 to 100 times greater than hunter-gatherer societies. This demographic explosion created opportunities for greater specialization and technological innovation, but also required increasingly complex social institutions for managing resources and resolving conflicts. River Valley civilizations established patterns of settlement and social organization influencing human development for millennia. Urban concentration, writing and record-keeping systems, and complex trade networks all originated in these riverine societies. The integration of agriculture, crafts, trade, and administration that characterized these civilizations became the foundation for all subsequent urban societies. The success of these civilizations also demonstrated humanity as growing ability to consciously modify environments rather than simply adapting to them. River Valley societies developed terraforming capabilities, irrigation systems, flood controls, and agricultural modifications that could sustainably alter landscapes to support much larger populations. This environmental management represented a fundamental shift in the human-nature relationship. However, River Valley agriculture also created humanity's first environmental challenges. Intensive irrigation could lead to soil salinization that reduced agricultural productivity over time. Deforestation for fuel and construction materials could alter watershed dynamics and increase flood risks. Some River Valley civilizations, like those of the Indus Valley, may have collapsed partly due to environmental degradation caused by their own success. The knowledge systems developed by River Valley societies, astronomy for predicting floods, mathematics for calculating irrigation requirements, engineering for construction projects, laid foundations for scientific thinking that would characterize human intellectual development. These practical sciences emerged from agricultural necessities, but created intellectual frameworks applicable to broader questions about natural phenomena. Trade relationships established by River Valley civilizations created humanity's first global connections. Mesopotamian merchants traded with Indus Valley cities. Chinese silk reached Mediterranean markets. Egyptian gold appeared in Central Asian sites. These commercial networks didn't just move goods, they transmitted technologies, ideas, and cultural practices that began creating shared elements in human civilization worldwide. The linguistic legacy of River Valley civilizations persists today. Many of the world's major language families, Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, Afro-Asiatic, have their origins in River Valley societies that developed writing systems and maintained cultural continuity across millennia. The administrative vocabularies, technical terminology, and literary traditions developed by these civilizations continue to influence modern languages. River Valley civilizations also established humanity's first systematic approaches to time measurement, calendar systems, and historical record-keeping. The need to predict flood cycles, coordinate agricultural activities, and maintain administrative continuity led to sophisticated chronological systems that enabled these societies to maintain cultural memory across centuries. The transformation of human society along rivers represents one of history's most significant turning points, establishing foundations for civilization that persist today. The innovations developed during this period, agriculture, writing, urban planning, and complex social institutions, created the template for human social organization that characterizes modern societies worldwide. Chapter 5. The Cognitive Explosion. In a cave at Blombos, South Africa, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood holds a small piece of ochre iron oxide that has been deliberately carved with geometric patterns 75,000 years ago. The lines are perfectly parallel, intersecting at precise angles to create a diamond pattern that could only have been created by someone thinking symbolically. This isn't random scratching or accidental markings from tool maintenance. This is evidence of an abstract mind capable of creating meaning beyond immediate survival needs. But Henshelwood's discovery represents just one piece of a much larger puzzle that has revolutionized our understanding of human cognitive evolution. Around the world, archaeologists have been uncovering evidence of what they call the cognitive revolution, a dramatic transformation in human thinking that occurred roughly 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. This wasn't just development of new tools or hunting techniques. This was the emergence of modern human consciousness, the ability to think symbolically, create art, develop complex languages, and most remarkably, believe in things that existed only in collective imagination. Archaeological evidence for this cognitive transformation appears simultaneously across multiple continents, suggesting that underlying neurological changes occurred before human populations had spread throughout the world. In South Africa, sites like Blombos Cave and Pinnacle Point reveal sophisticated artistic expression, complex tool-making traditions, and evidence of maritime resource exploitation dating back 70,000 to 100,000 years. In North Africa, sites like Grotte de Pigeons in Morocco contain shell beads and ochre pigments indicating symbolic behavior from similar time periods. The European archaeological record, while more recent, provides perhaps the most dramatic evidence of the cognitive revolution's impact. Beginning around 40,000 years ago, European sites reveal an explosion of artistic expression unprecedented in human history. Cave paintings at Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira represent not just aesthetic achievement, but sophisticated symbolic thinking that could represent absent objects, convey complex narratives, and encode cultural knowledge for future generations. One of the most significant aspects of this cognitive transformation was development of what archaeologists call symbolic material culture, objects deriving meaning not from practical function, but from shared cultural understanding. Shell beads found thousands of kilometers from oceanic sources indicate not just long distance, trade networks, but shared aesthetic values and social systems that could maintain meaning across vast distances and different cultural groups. The technological innovations accompanying the cognitive revolution were equally remarkable. Development of composite tools, implements made from multiple materials combined in sophisticated ways, required abstract planning and understanding of complex cause and effect relationships. Spear points, hafted onto wooden shafts with plant-based adhesives, represented technological integration, demanding both individual skill and cultural transmission of complex manufacturing techniques. Perhaps most significantly, this period saw emergence of modern human language capabilities. While language origins remain debated, most linguists agree that the cultural complexity evident from this period required sophisticated communication abilities. The coordination needed for complex hunting strategies, precision required for technological innovation, and social cooperation evident in large-scale artistic projects all suggest that modern human language was fully developed by this time. Recent research into relationships between cave art and acoustic properties has provided fascinating insights into cognitive processes underlying symbolic expression. Many spectacular cave art sites are located in chambers with exceptional acoustic properties, where sounds echo and reverberate in complex ways. This has led researchers to propose that early artistic expression was intimately connected with vocal and musical traditions, creating multimedia experiences integrating visual, auditory, and social elements. Musical instrument development during this period provides additional evidence for cognitive revolution sophistication. Bone flutes from European sites dating to 40,000 years ago represent some of humanity's earliest musical instruments, requiring sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles and precise craftsmanship. Social contexts in which such instruments would have been used suggest complex ceremonial and cultural practices going far beyond immediate survival needs. The cognitive revolution also marked emergence of what anthropologists call fiction, the ability to create and share beliefs about things existing only in collective imagination. This capacity for shared fiction enabled unprecedented forms of social cooperation, allowing large groups of unrelated individuals to coordinate activities based on common beliefs, values, and social institutions. Archaeological evidence suggests this period saw development of complex burial practices indicating beliefs about afterlife and spiritual realms. Sites like Sunjir in Russia contain elaborate burials with thousands of ivory beads, indicating not just sophisticated craftsmanship, but belief systems attributing significance to death and possibly afterlife concepts. The speed at which human populations spread across the globe after the cognitive revolution suggests these new mental capabilities provided enormous adaptive advantages. Unlike earlier human migrations that were slow and often unsuccessful, post-cognitive revolution populations could rapidly adapt to new environments, develop appropriate technologies, and maintain cultural coherence across vast distances. Genetic evidence for the cognitive revolution remains circumstantial but compelling. The FOXP2 gene, sometimes called the language gene, shows evidence of recent evolutionary pressure in human populations, though its exact role in cognitive development remains debated. More significantly, patterns of human genetic diversity suggest that populations successfully colonizing the world after 70,000 years ago possessed cognitive and cultural advantages earlier emigrant groups lacked. The implications of the cognitive revolution extended far beyond individual survival advantages. For the first time in Earth's history, a species could accumulate cultural knowledge across generations, creating a form of evolution operating on timescales far faster than genetic change. This cultural evolution enabled humans to adapt to new environments, not through biological change requiring thousands of generations, but through behavioral innovation occurring within single lifetimes. The capacity for symbolic thinking became foundation for all subsequent human achievements. Language, art, religion, science, and complex social institutions all depend on cognitive abilities first appearing during the late Pleistocene. The archaeological record reveals that once these capabilities emerged, human cultural evolution accelerated dramatically, with innovations appearing and spreading at unprecedented rates. Religious and spiritual systems emerging during this period established patterns of thought that continue to influence human culture today. The ability to conceive of invisible forces, supernatural beings, and abstract principles created conceptual frameworks for understanding natural phenomena and organizing social relationships. These early belief systems provided social cohesion and cultural continuity that enabled human societies to maintain stability across generations. Artistic traditions developing during the cognitive revolution established aesthetic principles and symbolic systems influencing human culture for tens of thousands of years. Cave art motifs appearing in locations separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years suggest certain symbolic expressions may be fundamental aspects of human consciousness rather than cultural innovations. The development of personal ornamentation during this period reveals emerging concepts of individual identity and social differentiation. Shell beads, carved pendants, and decorative objects found at sites worldwide indicate that humans had begun using material culture to express personal and group identities in ways that went beyond simple functionality. Perhaps most remarkably, the cognitive revolution established humans as the first species capable of conscious cultural evolution. While other animals possess culture in the sense of learned behaviors pos. Perhaps most remarkably, the cognitive revolution established humans as the first species capable of conscious cultural evolution. While other animals possess culture in the sense of learned behaviors passed between generations, only humans developed the ability to deliberately modify and improve their cultural practices based on abstract planning and symbolic reasoning. The social implications were equally profound. The ability to share beliefs about invisible realities enabled new forms of cooperation that could unite large groups of unrelated individuals around common goals, values, and institutions. This capacity for large-scale cooperation based on shared fictions became the foundation for complex societies, trade networks, and eventually, civilizations. The cognitive abilities emerging during this revolution didn't just enable survival, they transformed the human relationship with reality itself. For the first time, a species could imagine alternative possibilities, plan for distant futures, and create meaning that transcended immediate physical experience. This transformation marked the true beginning of human culture as we understand it today. Chapter 6: Masters of Adaptation in the Frozen Wilderness of Siberia. A 4,000-year-old hair fragment tells a story of remarkable adaptation. When scientists extracted DNA from this single strand, preserved in permafrost near Greenland, they discovered genetic variants never seen before, mutations that helped their owner's body produce heat more efficiently, process fat-rich diets, and maintain circulation in extreme cold. This wasn't just evolutionary adaptation. It was evidence of humans becoming biologically specialized for life in one of Earth's most challenging environments. But genetic adaptation was only part of the story. Across the Arctic, from Alaska to Greenland, archaeological sites reveal cultural innovations equally remarkable: sophisticated ice hunting techniques, ingenious shelter designs maintaining warmth at -40 degrees Celsius, and navigation methods guiding travelers across seemingly featureless ice landscapes. The Inuit and other Arctic peoples hadn't just survived in the Arctic. They had created entirely new ways of being human, perfectly suited to their environment. The story of human adaptation to diverse environments represents one of our species' most remarkable achievements, demonstrating how the same basic human toolkit could be modified to create radically different ways of life across every conceivable habitat on Earth. From scorching Sahara to frozen Arctic, from dense rainforests to high-altitude mountains, human populations developed specialized strategies, allowing them not just to survive, but thrive in conditions challenging any other species. Physiological adaptations. Different human populations provide compelling evidence of evolution in action over relatively short timescales. High-altitude populations in Tibet, the Andes, and Ethiopia independently evolved different solutions to low oxygen availability challenges. Tibetans developed increased lung capacity and more efficient oxygen utilization, while Andean populations evolved higher red blood cell counts and enlarged hearts. Ethiopian highlanders developed yet another approach, maintaining normal blood oxygen levels through enhanced oxygen carrying capacity. These adaptations didn't occur in isolation. They were part of integrated cultural and biological responses to environmental challenges. High-altitude populations didn't just evolve physiological adaptations. They developed cultural practices, architectural techniques, and social institutions specifically adapted to mountain environments. Traditional Tibetan architecture, for example, incorporates design principles maximizing solar heating during short growing seasons, while providing protection from intense ultraviolet radiation at altitude. Desert populations developed equally sophisticated adaptations to extreme heat and water scarcity. Bedouin peoples of Arabia evolved cultural practices maintaining human communities in some of Earth's most arid environments, developing nomadic strategies tracking seasonal water sources across vast territories. Their traditional clothing, shelter designs, and food preservation techniques represented thousands of years of cultural evolution specifically adapted to desert survival. Arctic adaptations were perhaps most remarkable, where human populations developed technologies and cultural practices enabling permanent settlement in conditions killing most other mammals within hours. Traditional Inuit technology included over 100 different types of snow, each with specific properties and uses in construction, navigation, and hunting. Their sophisticated understanding of sea ice dynamics enabled hunting seals and whales in conditions where modern technology would fail. Specialized hunting techniques represent some of the most impressive examples of human cultural adaptation. Arctic populations developed hunting strategies specifically adapted for pursuing prey across ice, including complex understanding of seal behavior, breathing patterns, and seasonal migrations. Construction of igloos, temporary shelters built from snow blocks, required sophisticated engineering knowledge and could be completed in conditions where other shelter types would be impossible to construct. Tropical adaptations were equally remarkable, though often less visible to outsiders. Rainforest populations in Amazonia, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia developed sophisticated ecological knowledge, identifying hundreds of plant species, predicting seasonal fruiting patterns, and navigating through seemingly impenetrable forest canopies. The Banana people of Borneo developed nomadic lifestyles, sustainably exploiting rainforest resources without depleting them, moving through forest territories in carefully planned cycles, allowing ecosystem regeneration. Island populations developed unique adaptations to maritime environments requiring entirely different skill sets. Polynesian navigation techniques could guide voyages across thousands of kilometers of open ocean using only observations of stars, currents, and wildlife behavior. These navigation systems were so sophisticated they enabled colonization of virtually every habitable Pacific island, from Hawaii to Easter Island to New Zealand. Social and cultural institutions, developing in different environments, were as diverse as physical adaptations. Arctic populations developed sharing systems, redistributing resources across entire communities, ensuring successful hunters provided for those whose hunts had failed. Desert nomads created complex kinship systems, maintaining social cohesion across vast distances and long periods of separation. Cultural transmission mechanisms varied dramatically between different environments, each adapted to specific challenges of maintaining cultural continuity under different conditions. Oral traditions in Australia incorporated geographic information into songlines, guiding travelers across continental distances while preserving cultural and spiritual knowledge. Arctic populations developed teaching methods transmitting complex technical knowledge about ice conditions, weather patterns, and hunting strategies across generations. Artistic and spiritual traditions, emerging in different environments, reflected unique challenges and opportunities of each habitat. Arctic art incorporated materials and themes specific to ice and snow environments, while tropical populations developed artistic traditions reflecting complexity and diversity of rainforest ecosystems. Mountain populations created spiritual systems incorporating high altitude landscapes and weather patterns into cosmological understanding. The diversity of human adaptations across different environments demonstrates the remarkable flexibility that became our species' greatest evolutionary advantage. Unlike other animals restricted to specific ecological niches, humans developed the ability to consciously modify both their culture and, over longer timescales, their biology to suit virtually any environment on Earth. This adaptability wasn't just individual ingenuity. It required sophisticated social institutions, maintaining and transmitting complex cultural knowledge across generations. Navigation techniques of Polynesian societies, ecological knowledge of rainforest peoples, and survival skills of Arctic populations all represent collective achievements no individual could have developed alone. The speed at which human populations could develop environmental adaptations reveals the power of cultural evolution as an adaptive mechanism. While genetic adaptations to new environments typically require thousands of years to develop, cultural adaptations could emerge within a few generations, allowing human populations to colonize new environments far more rapidly than would be possible through biological adaptation alone. Perhaps most significantly, the diversity of human adaptations established a foundation for cultural diversity characterizing our species today. Different survival strategies, social institutions, and worldviews developing in different environments created raw material from which the world's diverse cultures would emerge. Languages, religions, artistic traditions, and social systems all bear the imprint of environmental adaptations developed by early human populations. The success of human environmental adaptation also established a pattern influencing our species' development throughout history: the tendency to modify environments to suit human needs rather than simply adapting to existing conditions. This active environmental management, from controlled burning in Australia to irrigation agriculture in river valleys, marked the beginning of human transformation of Earth's ecosystems. Modern genetic analysis has revealed that many environmental adaptations developed by early human populations continue to influence contemporary human biology and health. Understanding these ancient adaptations provides insights into modern medical treatments, helps explain geographic variations in disease susceptibility, and informs approaches to public health in different environments. The extraordinary range of human environmental adaptations demonstrates that our species' greatest strength lies not in any particular biological adaptation, but in our capacity to consciously create cultural solutions to environmental challenges. This flexibility enabled humans to become the most widely distributed species on Earth and continues to be our greatest asset in facing contemporary environmental challenges. Chapter 7. The last great CRSNZ at the Monte Verde site in southern Chile. Archaeologist Tom Dillehay brushes sediment away from a fragment of mastodon hide, preserved for over 14,500 years. This isn't just any prehistoric remains, it's evidence of the last great human migration, the colonization of the Americas by peoples who crossed from Asia into a completely unknown world. The hide shows cut marks from stone tools, indicating that the first Americans weren't just surviving in their new environment. They were actively hunting megafauna that had evolved without any fear of human predators. The discovery at Monte Verde revolutionized our understanding of American prehistory, pushing back the timeline of human colonization and revealing sophisticated adaptations, enabling success in environments unlike anything humans had previously encountered. These weren't desperate refugees fleeing harsh conditions. They were skilled explorers who brought with them a toolkit of knowledge and technology, rapidly adaptable to exploit new resources and overcome unprecedented challenges. The peopling of the Americas represents humanity's final great colonization event, a complex process likely involving multiple waves of migration over thousands of years, each bringing distinct cultural traditions and adaptive strategies to continents isolated from human influence for their entire evolutionary history. Recent archaeological and genetic evidence reveals this process was far more complicated and began much earlier than previously believed. For decades, the dominant theory held that first Americans arrived via land bridge between Siberia and Alaska around 13,000 years ago, following an ice-free corridor opening between massive glacial sheets covering much of northern North America. This Clovis first model suggested these early Americans rapidly spread southward, reaching South America's tip within a few centuries while hunting large mammals evolved without human predators. However, mounting evidence from sites like Monte Verde in Chile, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, and Paisley Cave in Oregon suggests a much more complex picture. These sites contain human artifacts dating to 14,000 years ago or earlier, indicating people were already established throughout both North and South America before the supposed ice-free corridor had opened. This evidence suggests the primary route into the Americas was likely along the Pacific coast, where early mariners could have island-hopped along partially ice-free coastlines. The coastal migration hypothesis is supported by genetic evidence from contemporary Native American populations. DNA analysis reveals founding populations were relatively small but genetically diverse, suggesting they were drawn from multiple groups across Siberia and East Asia. Genetic patterns also indicate coastal and interior populations developed independently for thousands of years before coming into contact, supporting separate migration routes and distinct cultural adaptations. Archaeological evidence reveals first Americans possessed sophisticated technologies specifically adapted for exploiting New World resources. Unlike large, distinctive Clovis points characterizing later periods, earliest American tool traditions show remarkable diversity, suggesting different groups developed distinct approaches to hunting and resource exploitation. Some groups specialized in marine resources along both Pacific and Atlantic coasts, while others developed technologies specifically designed for hunting massive herbivores, dominating American landscapes. The impact of human arrival on American ecosystems was profound and immediate. Within 2,000 years of human colonization, over 80% of North America's large mammal species had become extinct, including mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and massive short-faced bears. While climate change at the Ice Age's end likely contributed to these extinctions, the timing strongly suggests human hunting pressure was the primary cause. The extinction of American megafauna forced rapid cultural adaptations, leading to some of history's most sophisticated hunter-gatherer societies. Without large domesticable animals, American populations developed alternatives including sophisticated plant management systems, complex seasonal migration patterns, and social institutions coordinating resource exploitation across vast territories. In Eastern North America, populations developed what archaeologists call forest efficiency, detailed ecological knowledge, identifying and exploiting hundreds of plant species, predicting seasonal availability patterns, and managing forest ecosystems through controlled burning and selective harvesting. These practices were so sophisticated, they increased forest productivity and created what early European colonists mistook for pristine wilderness. Western North American populations developed different strategies adapted to more arid environments. Great Basin peoples like the Shoshone developed nomadic systems, exploiting widely scattered resources across desert landscapes, developing sophisticated knowledge of seasonal water sources, seed processing techniques, and long-term food storage methods. Pacific Northwest populations developed complex fishing technologies, exploiting salmon runs, creating some of the world's few affluent hunter-gatherer societies. The development of agriculture in the Americas followed a completely different trajectory. From Old World patterns, creating unique crops and farming systems adapted to American environments. In Mesoamerica, populations domesticated maize, beans, and squash crops grown together in complementary systems enhancing soil fertility. In South America, Andean populations domesticated potatoes, quinoa, and llamas, developing high-altitude agricultural systems supporting dense populations in mountain environments. These agricultural innovations enabled development of complex societies rivaling Old World civilizations in sophistication. The Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations developed sophisticated astronomy, mathematics, and engineering capabilities while maintaining distinctly American approaches to social organization and environmental management. Linguistic diversity developing in the Americas provides additional evidence for colonization process complexity. While Old World language families typically contain dozens or hundreds of related languages, the Americas contain over 1,000 distinct languages organized into more than 150 language families. This extraordinary diversity suggests colonization involved multiple waves of migration from different source populations, followed by thousands of years of independent cultural development. Social institutions developing in different parts of the Americas reflected both shared heritage and independent innovation. Many American societies developed complex chiefdom systems coordinating activities across multiple communities, while others maintained egalitarian social structures persisting for thousands of years. Some developed elaborate trade networks moving exotic goods across continental distances, while others remained largely self-sufficient within local territories. The technological achievements of American civilizations were remarkable in their diversity and sophistication. Inca engineers developed road systems crossing some of the world's most challenging terrain, including suspension bridges spanning deep canyons and tunnels carved through solid rock. Maya astronomers calculated planetary cycles with accuracy matching modern instruments, while their mathematical systems included concepts like zero, independently developed from Old World traditions. American populations also developed unique approaches to environmental management, creating sustainable relationships between human societies and natural ecosystems. Amazonian populations developed agroforestry systems, creating forest gardens more productive than natural ecosystems while maintaining biodiversity. Andean populations developed terracing systems preventing erosion while maximizing agricultural productivity in steep mountain terrain. The social and political innovations developing in the Americas were equally impressive. Iroquois confederacy systems influenced American constitutional development, while Inca administrative systems managed multi-ethnic empires spanning thousands of kilometers. Many American societies developed decision-making processes emphasizing consensus and community participation that differed markedly from old world hierarchical systems. When European contact began in 1492, American populations had created some of history's most sophisticated and sustainable societies. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, was larger and cleaner than any European city of its time. Inca agricultural systems supported population densities exceeding those of contemporary Europe. Maya cities featured astronomical observatories, elaborate water management systems, and architectural achievements rivaling any global civilization. The colonization of the Americas represents both the culmination of human global expansion and the beginning of a new phase in cultural evolution. For the first time in our species' history, human populations had spread to every habitable continent, establishing the global distribution characterizing our species today. The success of American colonization also demonstrated the maturation of human adaptive capabilities. Technologies, social institutions, and ecological knowledge enabling success in the Americas represented the sophisticated endpoint of 50,000 years of cultural evolution, combining innovations developed across the Old World with new adaptations specific to American environments. Perhaps most significantly, the American experience established final proof that human cultural evolution could create solutions to virtually any environmental challenge. The diversity of societies emerging in the Americas, from Arctic hunting cultures to tropical agricultural civilizations, demonstrated that human creativity and adaptability knew no environmental limits. The independent development of agriculture, complex societies, and technological innovations in the Americas also provided compelling evidence for universality of human cultural patterns while highlighting infinite variety of expressions these patterns could take. Chapter 8. When cultures lie on a windswept plateau in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, archaeologists working at Denisova Cave have uncovered evidence of one of the most remarkable encounters in human history. The DNA extracted from a 90,000-year-old bone fragment reveals something unprecedented. The remains of a young girl whose mother was a Neanderthal and whose father belonged to the mysterious Denisovan lineage. This single discovery revolutionized our understanding of early human interactions, revealing that different human species didn't just coexist, they intermarried and created hybrid offspring who contributed their genetic legacy to modern populations. But this ancient encounter was just one of countless meetings between different human groups that have shaped our species' development. From the earliest migrations out of Africa to the age of exploration, human history has been punctuated by moments when distinct cultures encountered one another, leading to exchanges of genes, technologies, ideas, and diseases that fundamentally altered the course of human development. The earliest documented cultural encounters occurred between different human species during the Pleistocene period. Genetic analysis of modern human DNA reveals that virtually all non-African populations carry genetic signatures from Neanderthals, typically comprising 1 to 4% of their genome. This genetic introgression indicates that modern humans and Neanderthals didn't just coexist, they regularly intermarried over thousands of years across Europe and Western Asia. The discovery of the Denisova cave hybrid reveals that these encounters were even more complex than previously imagined. Denisovan genetic contributions appear in Southeast Asian and Oceanian populations, with some groups carrying up to 6% Denisovan DNA. Recent research has revealed that some ancient genetic contributions provided adaptive advantages, including improved high-altitude physiology in Tibetan populations and enhanced immune function in various groups. Archaeological evidence provides additional insights into these early encounters. Sites across Europe reveal periods when Neanderthal and modern human tool traditions coexisted or showed evidence of technological exchange. The Chattel-Peronian industry of Western Europe combines Neanderthal manufacturing techniques with modern human innovations, suggesting direct cultural contact and learning between groups. As human populations spread across the globe and developed distinct cultural traditions, subsequent encounters became increasingly complex. The meeting of agriculturalists and hunter-gatherers created some of the most significant cultural transformations in human history. Archaeological evidence from Europe reveals that the spread of Neolithic farming communities involved both migration of farming populations and cultural exchange with indigenous hunter-gatherers. Genetic studies of European populations show that modern Europeans descend from 3 primary ancestral groups: indigenous hunter-gatherers, early Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, and Bronze Age pastoralists from the Eurasian steppes. Each migration brought new technologies, languages, and cultural practices that integrated with existing traditions to create Europe's complex cultural mosaic. The Bronze Age witnessed unprecedented levels of cultural contact as metalworking technologies spread across Eurasia along trade networks connecting distant civilizations. The discovery of tin bronze in Europe, Central Asia, and East Asia indicates that knowledge of this complex alloy spread rapidly between societies, likely through networks of specialized craftspeople and traders, carrying both technical knowledge and cultural practices across vast distances. One of the most significant cultural encounters occurred with the development of horse domestication and mounted warfare among Central Asian pastoralists around 4,000 years ago. This innovation created mobile societies that could rapidly traverse vast distances, facilitating cultural and genetic exchange across the Eurasian steppes. The spread of Indo-European languages, chariot technology, and pastoral adaptations across much of Europe and Asia reflects the profound impact of these mobile societies. Maritime technologies created new opportunities for cultural contact across oceanic distances. Polynesian expansion across the Pacific, Viking voyages across the Atlantic, and Arab trading networks across the Indian Ocean all facilitated encounters between previously isolated populations. These maritime contacts often involved exchange of crops, technologies, and cultural practices, transforming societies thousands of kilometers from their origins. perhaps the most transformative cultural encounters occurred with development of transcontinental trade networks during the classical period. The Silk Road connected East Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe in a complex network of cultural and commercial exchange lasting over 1,000 years. Along these routes, technologies like papermaking and printing spread from China to Europe, while crops like grapes and alfalfa moved eastward from the Mediterranean. Disease exchange during these early cultural contacts had profound demographic and cultural impacts. The spread of epidemic diseases along trade routes periodically devastated populations lacking immunity to foreign pathogens. The Antonine Plague of the 2nd century CE and the Black Death of the 14th century both spread along Eurasian trade networks, causing demographic collapses that reshaped political and cultural landscapes across multiple continents. The Age of Exploration initiated a new phase of cultural contact with global implications. The encounter between Old and New World populations, separated for over 15,000 years, created exchange networks connecting all inhabited continents for the first time in human history. The Columbian Exchange transferred crops, animals, diseases, and cultural practices between the Americas and the rest of the world, fundamentally altering global agriculture, demographics, and cultural development. Indigenous American populations, lacking immunity to Old World diseases, experienced demographic catastrophes, eliminating up to 90% of pre-contact populations in many regions. However, American crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes enabled population growth in Europe, Africa, and Asia, while American precious metals funded European expansion and connected global trade networks. Cultural contact during the colonial period created new forms of cultural synthesis and resistance. Creole cultures emerged throughout the Americas, Africa, and Asia as European, African, and indigenous traditions combined in novel ways. These hybrid cultures often maintained elements of all contributing traditions while creating entirely new forms of expression in language, religion, art, and social organization. The African diaspora, created through the Atlantic slave trade, represents one of history's most tragic cultural encounters, but also one of its most creative. African cultural traditions, forcibly transplanted to the Americas, adapted and evolved in new environments while maintaining connections to ancestral homelands. African influences in American music, religion, cuisine, and social practices demonstrate the resilience of cultural traditions under extreme adversity. Modern genetic analysis has revealed the complexity of these historical encounters, showing that virtually all human populations are products of multiple ancestral groups mixing at different times and proportions. Even populations appearing culturally homogeneous often show genetic evidence of ancient migrations, conquests, and cultural exchanges occurring centuries or millennia ago. The history of cultural contact also reveals that innovation often emerged at boundaries between different cultural zones. Trade routes, migration corridors, and other contact zones became crucibles of cultural synthesis where different traditions encountered and influenced one another to create new hybrid forms. Cities, ports, and border regions often became centers of cultural creativity and technological innovation. Language contact and change provide particularly clear evidence of cultural encounters throughout history. Loanwords, structural borrowings, and Creole languages all reflect historical moments when different linguistic communities came into contact. The global spread of European languages during colonial periods created multilingual situations that continue to influence modern language patterns. Religious syncretism represents another major outcome of cultural contact, as different spiritual traditions encountered one another and created hybrid belief systems. Christianity in Latin America incorporated indigenous and African elements, while Buddhism adapted to local traditions as it spread across Asia. These syncretic religions often provided frameworks for cultural resistance and identity maintenance. Under colonial rule, the history of cultural contact reveals that human populations have never been truly isolated, and that our species' greatest achievements often emerge from creative synthesis occurring when different cultural traditions encountered one another. From earliest interbreeding between human species to global networks of the modern world, cultural contact has been a fundamental driver of human innovation and adaptation. These encounters also demonstrate the double-edged nature of cultural contact. While exchange of ideas, technologies, and genes has driven human progress, contact has also been a source of conflict, disease transmission, and cultural destruction. The balance between synthesis and domination in cultural encounters has shaped much of human history and continues to influence global politics and cultural development today. Chapter 9. The birth of Dorisidy in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Linguist Dan Everett sits with speakers of Pirahu, one of the world's most unusual languages. As he listens to their conversations, he realizes he's encountering something that challenges fundamental assumptions about human cognition. The Pirahu language has no words for numbers beyond few and many. It has no creation myths, no abstract art, no words for colors beyond light and dark. Yet these speakers navigate complex social relationships, sophisticated ecological knowledge, and rich cultural traditions that have sustained their communities for thousands of years. The Pirahu represent just one example of the extraordinary diversity that emerged as human populations adapted to different environments and developed in isolation from one another. From the tonal languages of East Asia that can convey meaning through subtle pitch changes, to the Inuit languages distinguishing dozens of types of snow, to the Australian Aboriginal songlines encoding geographic information in musical narratives, human cultures develop solutions to universal challenges as diverse as the environments that shape them. But the Pirahu example reveals something even more profound about human cultural diversity. Their language structure suggests that not all human cultures develop the same cognitive tools for understanding reality. While most languages have mechanisms for discussing abstract concepts, hypothetical situations, and recursive thinking, the Pirahu language appears to be optimized for immediate, concrete experience. This isn't a deficit. It's a different solution to the challenge of human communication, one that may actually provide advantages in certain environmental and social contexts. This diversity wasn't just linguistic. It extended to every aspect of human experience, from kinship systems and religious beliefs to artistic expression and technological innovation. The development of human cultural diversity represents one of our species' most remarkable achievements, demonstrating how the same basic cognitive and social capabilities could generate radically different solutions to universal human challenges. The mathematical concepts developed by different cultures provide another striking example of cognitive diversity. While the Pirahu lack precise number words, other cultures develop sophisticated mathematical systems that went far beyond practical necessity. The Maya developed concepts of zero and infinity independently from old world traditions, while also creating calendar systems of extraordinary precision that tracked multiple astronomical cycles simultaneously. Polynesian navigators developed mathematical concepts for calculating distances, bearings, and positions at sea that enabled transoceanic voyages using only observations of stars, currents, and wildlife behavior. Some cultures developed unique approaches to organizing social relationships that created entirely different ways of understanding human identity and belonging. The Aboriginal Australian skin group system divides all people into complex categories that determine marriage rules, ceremonial obligations, and social interactions. This system is so sophisticated that it can maintain genetic diversity and social cohesion across continental distances and hundreds of distinct language groups. It represents a form of social engineering that achieves through cultural rules what other societies might accomplish through political institutions or religious hierarchies. Language diversity provides perhaps the most striking example of human cultural differentiation. At the time of European contact with the Americas, humans spoke an estimated 7,000 to 10,000 distinct languages, organized into hundreds of language families that have been diverging for tens of thousands of years. This linguistic diversity wasn't random, it reflected the complex history of human migration, settlement, and cultural development occurring since our species first spread across the globe. The process of linguistic divergence followed predictable patterns, illuminating broader processes of cultural evolution. When populations became geographically separated, their languages began changing independently through normal processes of linguistic change. Over time, these changes accumulated to create mutually unintelligible dialects and eventually distinct languages. The degree of linguistic difference between related languages provides a molecular clock estimating when populations separated and began independent cultural development. Some regions developed extraordinary linguistic diversity, reflecting complex histories of migration, cultural contact, and environmental adaptation. Papua New Guinea, despite having less than 0.1% of the world's land area, contained over 800 languages at European contact, more than 10% of global linguistic diversity. This remarkable diversity reflects both the island's complex geography, creating numerous isolated populations, and its long history of human occupation, providing time for extensive cultural differentiation. Religious and spiritual systems showed similar patterns of diversification, with different cultures developing unique approaches to fundamental questions about reality's nature, human purpose, and relationships between natural and supernatural worlds. Animistic traditions seeing spirits in natural phenomena develop differently in forest, desert, and Arctic environments, reflecting specific ecological relationships shaping each culture's worldview. Australian Aboriginal cultures developed perhaps the world's most sophisticated integration of spiritual belief and practical knowledge through the Dreamtime concept, encoding both sacred narratives and practical geographic information in complex song cycles, guiding travelers across continental distances. These songlines represented unique solutions to maintaining cultural knowledge across vast territories and long time periods. Kinship systems showed remarkable variation across human cultures, with different societies developing radically different approaches to organizing family relationships, inheritance patterns, and social obligations. Some cultures developed complex clan systems with dozens of relative categories, each associated with specific rights and responsibilities. Others maintained simple nuclear family structures, emphasizing individual autonomy over extended family connections. Art and aesthetic traditions reflected both universal human capabilities and specific cultural values shaped by local environments and histories. Arctic peoples developed artistic traditions, incorporating materials and themes specific to ice and snow environments, while tropical cultures created art forms reflecting rainforest ecosystem complexity and diversity. Some cultures emphasize realistic representation, while others developed abstract symbolic systems, conveying meaning through geometric patterns and stylized forms. Technological traditions showed similar diversification patterns, with different cultures developing specialized tools and techniques adapted to specific environmental challenges. Arctic peoples developed sophisticated technologies for hunting marine mammals through sea ice, while desert cultures created water management systems sustaining communities in arid environments. Tropical cultures developed complex plant processing technologies, rendering toxic plants edible and extracting useful materials from forest resources. Social organization varied dramatically across human cultures, reflecting different solutions to universal challenges of cooperation, resource distribution, and conflict resolution. Some cultures developed hierarchical systems with complex social stratification, while others maintained egalitarian structures, emphasizing social equality and consensus decision-making. Some created centralized political systems coordinating activities across large territories, while others remained organized as small, autonomous communities. Economic systems showed equally remarkable diversity, with different cultures developing unique approaches to production, exchange, and resource allocation. Some societies developed complex market systems with standardized currencies and long-distance trade networks, while others maintained gift economies based on reciprocal exchange and social obligation. Some emphasized individual wealth accumulation, while others created leveling mechanisms preventing significant economic inequality. Geographic isolation's role in cultural differentiation cannot be overstated. Islands, mountain valleys, desert oases, and other isolated environments created natural laboratories for cultural evolution, allowing small populations to develop unique adaptations without outside interference. Many of the world's most distinctive cultures emerged in such isolated environments, where unique environmental challenges fostered innovative cultural solutions. However, isolation was never complete, and the most creative cultural innovations often emerged at boundaries between different cultural zones. Trade routes, migration corridors, and other contact zones became crucibles of cultural synthesis, where different traditions encountered and influenced one another to create new hybrid forms. The tempo of cultural change varied dramatically across different regions and time periods. Some cultures remained relatively stable for thousands of years, developing sophisticated but conservative traditions changing slowly over time. Others experienced rapid cultural transformation driven by environmental change, population growth, or contact with other cultures. Musical traditions developed extraordinary diversity, reflecting both universal human capabilities for rhythm, melody, and harmony, and specific cultural values and aesthetic preferences. Some cultures developed complex polyphonic traditions with intricate harmonic relationships, while others emphasized rhythmic complexity and percussive elements. Some created musical scales and tonal systems completely different from Western traditions, while others developed unique instruments perfectly adapted to local materials and acoustic environments. Food cultures and culinary traditions represent another dimension of human diversity, with different populations developing unique approaches to food preparation, preservation, and consumption. Some cultures developed fermentation techniques, creating complex flavors and preserving nutritional value, while others developed cooking methods maximizing flavor and digestibility of local ingredients. Spice use, flavor combinations, and meal structures varied enormously across cultures, reflecting both available ingredients and aesthetic preferences. Architectural traditions showed remarkable adaptation to local climates, materials, and social needs. Arctic populations developed construction techniques using snow, ice, and limited wood resources to create warm, durable shelters. Tropical cultures created ventilated structures using local plant materials to provide cooling and protection from rain. Desert populations developed building techniques using adobe, stone, and other local materials to create comfortable living spaces in extreme heat. Textile traditions reflected both functional needs and aesthetic values, with different cultures developing unique approaches to fiber production, weaving techniques, and decorative patterns. Some cultures developed complex dyeing techniques, creating brilliant colors from local plants and minerals, while others emphasized natural fiber colors and textures. Weaving patterns often encoded cultural information, social status, and spiritual beliefs in ways comprehensible only to cultural insiders. The extraordinary diversity of human cultures emerging during our species. Global expansion represents thousands of different experiments in human social organization, each adapted to specific environmental challenges and historical circumstances. This diversity wasn't just aesthetic or intellectual, it represented alternative approaches to universal human challenges, each containing insights potentially valuable for our collective future. The loss of cultural diversity characterizing the modern era represents unprecedented impoverishment of human experience and knowledge. Many of the world's approximately 7,000 languages are now endangered, with linguistic diversity disappearing at rates comparable to biological extinction. With these languages disappear unique ways of understanding the world, specialized knowledge about local environments, and alternative approaches to universal human challenges. The study of cultural diversity also reveals fundamental unity underlying human variation. Despite dramatic differences in language, religion, social organization, and technology, all human cultures share basic features reflecting our common cognitive and social heritage. All cultures have language, art, music, religion, and complex social institutions, suggesting these capabilities are fundamental aspects of human nature rather than cultural accidents. Perhaps most importantly, the history of cultural diversity demonstrates there are many different ways to be human, and our species' greatest strength lies not in any particular cultural tradition, but in our capacity to create and adapt different traditions to meet changing circumstances. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Ancient WRLD, a laboratory at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig. Geneticist Svante Pääbo examines DNA sequences that tell a story spanning 50,000 years. The genetic variants he's tracking aren't just historical curiosities. They're active parts of modern human biology, influencing everything from immune system function to high-altitude adaptation to disease susceptibility. Some of these genetic variants entered the human gene pool through interbreeding with Neanderthals and Denisovans tens of thousands of years ago, while others reflect more recent adaptations to agriculture, urbanization, and cultural change. But the influence of our ancient past extends far beyond genetics. The migration routes followed by our ancestors became the highways of historical trade networks. The environmental adaptations they developed became the foundations of agricultural systems that still feed billions. The cognitive innovations of the Upper Paleolithic created the mental frameworks underlying modern science, art, and technology. We are not just descended from those ancient wanderers. We are living extensions of their epic journey across space and time. The legacy of early human cultural diversification continues to shape modern human societies in ways both obvious and subtle, creating patterns that persist despite thousands of years of subsequent cultural change and global interconnection. From genetic variations influencing modern health and behavior to cultural institutions tracing their origins to ancient adaptations, the deep history of human cultural development remains an active force in contemporary life. Modern neuroscience. Research is revealing that the cognitive innovations of our ancestors have left lasting imprints on how our brains process information. The human capacity for music, which emerged during the Upper Paleolithic period, involves neural networks that overlap significantly with those used for language, mathematics, and social cognition. This suggests that the musical innovations of Ice Age Europeans may have contributed to the development of other cognitive abilities that characterize modern human intelligence. Recent studies of traditional ecological knowledge are revealing that indigenous populations around the world have preserved. Sophisticated environmental sciences that developed over thousands of years. Australian Aboriginal fire management practices, for example, are based on detailed understanding of plant ecology, animal behavior, and seasonal patterns that enable controlled burning to increase biodiversity and prevent catastrophic wildfires. These practices are now being adopted by modern conservation biologists as more effective than conventional Western approaches to ecosystem management. The architectural principles developed by ancient populations continue to influence modern, sustainable building design. Traditional Middle Eastern wind tower systems that provided natural cooling in desert environments are being incorporated into contemporary green architecture. Inuit snow construction techniques are informing modern approaches to building in Arctic conditions as climate change opens new northern territories to development. The legacy of early human cultural diversification continues to shape modern human societies in ways both obvious and subtle, creating patterns that persist despite thousands of years of subsequent cultural change and global interconnection. From genetic variations influencing modern health and behavior to cultural institutions tracing their origins to ancient adaptations, the deep history of human cultural development remains an active force in contemporary life. Genetic research has revealed that many physiological differences between modern human populations reflect adaptations beginning during the initial dispersal of our species across the globe. The lactose tolerance allowing many Europeans and some Africans to digest dairy products as adults emerged independently in multiple populations as they developed pastoral lifestyles over the past 10,000 years. High-altitude adaptations in Tibetan, Andean, and Ethiopian populations developed over thousands of years as these groups settled in mountain environments, with some genetic variants providing up to 10% improvement in oxygen processing efficiency. Disease resistance patterns influencing modern global health also reflect ancient population histories. The sickle cell trait providing protection against malaria emerged in multiple African populations over thousands of years, while genetic variants providing resistance to other tropical diseases show similar geographic distributions mirroring ancient settlement patterns. Conversely, the devastating impact of Old World diseases on New World populations during European colonization reflected 15,000 years of separate evolutionary history, leaving Native Americans vulnerable to pathogens their ancestors had never encountered. Modern linguistic diversity, while reduced from historical peaks, still reflects ancient patterns of human migration and settlement. The distribution of language families across the globe provides a roadmap of prehistoric human movements, with linguistic relationships revealing population connections occurring thousands of years before written history. The survival of language isolates languages with no known relatives in isolated geographic regions, often marks locations of ancient populations becoming culturally separated from other groups during initial human expansion across continents. Cultural institutions and practices appearing distinctly modern often have deep historical roots in ancient adaptations. Democratic decision-making processes found in many societies may trace their origins to egalitarian social structures characterizing small hunter-gatherer bands, where survival depended on group consensus and cooperative decision-making. The emphasis on individual achievement and competition, characterizing many modern societies, may reflect cultural patterns emerging during challenging migrations and environmental adaptations shaping early human populations. Religious and spiritual traditions, despite thousands of years of theological development, often retain elements traceable to earliest human cultural expressions. Shamanic practices found across diverse cultures from Siberia to South America share common elements, possibly reflecting shared heritage from initial human expansion across northern Eurasia and into the Americas. Cave art motifs appearing in locations separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years suggest certain symbolic expressions, maybe fundamental aspects of human consciousness rather than cultural innovations. Modern agricultural systems continue relying on crops and farming techniques developed during the Neolithic Revolution in various parts of the world. The Three Sisters agriculture of the Americas, corn, beans, and squash grown together, remains a sustainable farming practice developed over thousands of years by Native American populations. Similarly, rice cultivation techniques developed in ancient China continue feeding billions of people, while traditional crop varieties developed by ancient farmers provide genetic diversity. Modern plant breeders use to develop new cultivars. Urban planning and architectural traditions often incorporate principles first developed by early agricultural societies. Building orientation to maximize solar heating and minimize wind exposure reflects environmental adaptations crucial for survival in challenging climates. Traditional building materials and construction techniques developed by ancient populations often prove more sustainable and environmentally appropriate than modern alternatives. Trade networks and economic relationships, appearing to be products of modern globalization, often follow routes and patterns established by ancient human migrations. The Silk Road, connecting East and West for over 1,000 years, followed mountain passes and oasis towns used by human travelers for tens of thousands of years. Modern shipping routes across Pacific and Indian Oceans often parallel paths taken by ancient maritime peoples, who first established cultural connections across oceanic distances. Social and political institutions defining modern nation-states often reflect cultural boundaries established during prehistoric times. Language distributions, ethnic identities, and cultural practices influencing modern political boundaries were shaped by migration patterns, environmental adaptations, and cultural exchanges occurring thousands of years ago. The complex ethnic geography of regions like the Balkans, Central Asia, and the Caucasus reflects layers of ancient migrations, conquests, and cultural syntheses continuing to influence modern politics. Even modern psychological and cognitive patterns may reflect ancient adaptations to specific environmental and social challenges. The human tendency toward in-group loyalty and out-group suspicion may have been adaptive for small hunter-gatherer bands, competing for limited resources, but creates challenges in modern diverse societies. Our cognitive biases toward detecting patterns and inferring causal relationships served our ancestors well in understanding natural phenomena, but can lead to superstitious thinking in modern technological environments. The pace of modern cultural change, while unprecedented in human history, follows patterns established during earlier periods of rapid cultural innovation. The Upper Paleolithic cultural explosion, occurring 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, the Neolithic Revolution transforming human society 10,000 years ago, and the Urban Revolution creating the first cities 5,000 years ago, all involved rapid cultural transformations. Paralleling modern technological and social change, global migration patterns in the modern era often follow routes and create settlement patterns echoing ancient human movements. The movement of people from rural to urban areas, from economically disadvantaged to prosperous regions, and from politically unstable to stable countries, follows the same basic logic driving ancient human migrations: the search for better opportunities and more favorable conditions for survival and reproduction. Modern medical research increasingly recognizes that many health conditions and treatment responses vary between populations in ways reflecting ancient genetic adaptations. Pharmacogenomics, the study of how genetic variations affect drug responses, reveals that medications developed primarily for European populations may be less effective or cause different side effects in populations with different evolutionary histories. Understanding these ancient adaptations is becoming crucial for developing personalized medical treatments. Archaeological knowledge of traditional ecological practices is being applied to modern conservation efforts and sustainable agriculture. Indigenous fire management techniques developed over thousands of years in Australia are now being used to prevent catastrophic wildfires and restore degraded ecosystems. Ancient agricultural techniques like terracing, crop rotation, and polyculture are being rediscovered as sustainable alternatives to industrial farming methods. The artistic and aesthetic traditions established by ancient cultures continue to influence modern creative expression. Abstract geometric patterns found in Paleolithic cave art appear in contemporary design and architecture. Musical scales and rhythmic patterns developed by ancient cultures continue to shape modern musical traditions. The human preference for certain landscape types and architectural proportions may reflect aesthetic preferences shaped by environments our ancestors inhabited for thousands of years. Even modern sports and recreational activities often have roots in ancient survival skills and cultural practices. Long-distance running, swimming, archery, and wrestling all originated as essential survival skills for early humans. Team sports may reflect the cooperative hunting strategies that were crucial for obtaining protein in ancient environments. The human fascination with competition and physical achievement may stem from the selective pressures our ancestors faced during challenging migrations and environmental adaptations. Modern communication technologies are creating new forms of cultural contact and synthesis reminiscent of ancient patterns. The internet enables cultural exchange and hybrid formation at unprecedented speeds and scales, but follows basic patterns of cultural borrowing, adaptation, and synthesis that have characterized human societies throughout history. Social media platforms create virtual communities that transcend geographic boundaries, similar to how ancient trade networks connected distant populations through shared interests and practices. Climate change and environmental degradation are forcing modern humans to redevelop many of the adaptive strategies that enabled our ancestors to survive in challenging environments. Traditional knowledge about water conservation, sustainable agriculture, and environmental management is being recognized as valuable for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. The flexibility and innovation that enabled ancient humans to adapt to changing climates may be crucial for our species' future survival. The study of ancient human migrations and cultural adaptations provides insights into modern social and political challenges. Understanding how ancient populations successfully integrated diverse groups through trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange can inform approaches to modern multiculturalism and immigration. The strategies ancient societies used to maintain cultural identity while adapting to new environments may be relevant for modern diaspora communities. Modern genetic research is revealing that human populations are far more interconnected than previously believed, with virtually all groups showing evidence of ancient migrations, cultural contacts, and genetic mixing. This understanding undermines racial categorizations and nationalist ideologies based on assumptions of population purity or isolation. The deep history of human cultural contact and genetic exchange demonstrates that diversity and mixture, rather than isolation and homogeneity, are the fundamental characteristics of human populations. Perhaps most importantly, the story of early human cultural diversification provides perspective on modern debates about globalization, cultural preservation, and human identity. The remarkable creativity and adaptability that enabled our ancestors to colonize every environment on Earth and develop thousands of distinct cultural traditions demonstrates that diversity and change are fundamental characteristics of human nature. not threats to be resisted. The ancient patterns of migration, adaptation, and cultural innovation that shaped our species for tens of thousands of years continue to influence how we respond to modern challenges. Understanding these deep patterns can help us navigate contemporary issues while drawing on the wisdom accumulated through millennia of human experience. We remain the wandering, adapting, innovating species our ancestors became during humanity's great expansion across the earth. As we reach the end of our journey through the epic story of human cultural diversification, we return to that small band of humans standing at the edge of Africa 70,000 years ago. They couldn't have imagined that their descendants would paint masterpieces on cave walls in France, navigate by stars across Pacific oceans, build pyramids in Egypt and step temples in Cambodia, or develop thousands of languages to express every nuance of human experience. Yet in a very real sense, we are those same people. The cognitive revolution that enabled symbolic thinking, the adaptability that allowed survival in every environment on Earth, and the creativity that generated thousands of distinct cultures. These remain fundamental characteristics of human nature. Every time we solve a problem creatively, adapt to a new situation, or create meaning through art, language, or ritual, we're drawing on mental capabilities that first emerged during humanity's great expansion across the globe. The story we've traced from the great departure out of Africa to crossing impossible waters, from Ice Age survival to agricultural innovation, from cognitive revolution to cultural collision, reveals both the unity and diversity that define our species. We are one people who became many, yet we remain connected by shared heritage, common capabilities, and intertwined histories. But this story also reveals the extraordinary price of our success. The same cognitive abilities that enabled our ancestors to create meaning and build cultures also made possible the conflicts and competitions that have marked human history. The capacity for symbolic thinking that allowed cooperation among strangers also enabled the creation of in-group and out-group distinctions that could justify warfare and oppression. The technologies that enabled environmental mastery also created the potential for ecological destruction. Understanding these deep patterns becomes crucial as we face challenges that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. Climate change, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering all represent extensions of the same innovative capacity that enabled humans to spread across the globe and transform every environment we encountered. The question we face today is whether we can harness these capabilities for collective benefit or whether they will lead to our own destruction. The archaeological record provides both hope and warning. Throughout human history, populations have faced environmental crises, resource depletion, and social collapse. Some societies, like the Maya of the Classic period or the inhabitants of Easter Island, failed to develop sustainable relationships with their environments and experienced dramatic population declines. Others, like the Aboriginal Australians, or the traditional societies of Papua New Guinea, created stable cultural systems that persisted for tens of thousands of years. What distinguished successful societies from those that collapsed? The archaeological evidence suggests that resilient societies shared certain characteristics. They maintained cultural flexibility that allowed adaptation to changing conditions. They developed social institutions that could manage resources sustainably, and they preserved knowledge systems that enabled learning from environmental feedback. Most importantly, they recognized that human prosperity depended on maintaining healthy relationships with natural systems. Today, as we face global challenges requiring unprecedented cooperation, the story of our ancestors offers both warning and hope. The same tendencies toward group loyalty that helped small bands survive in hostile environments can create conflict in our interconnected world. but the same creativity and adaptability that enabled our ancestors to overcome seemingly impossible challenges can help us address modern problems like climate change, inequality, and technological disruption. The extraordinary diversity of human cultures that emerged during our species' expansion represents thousands of different experiments in human social organization, each containing insights that could prove valuable for our collective future. As globalization threatens to homogenize human culture, preserving and learning from this diversity becomes not just a matter of historical interest, but a crucial resource for navigating an uncertain future. Perhaps most importantly, understanding how early humans split into cultures across the world reminds us that change, adaptation, and innovation are not disruptions to human nature. They are human nature. Our ancestors' greatest achievement wasn't reaching every corner of the earth, but demonstrating that humans could become anything circumstances required while remaining fundamentally, remarkably human. The patterns established during humanity's great cultural diversification, the tendency to migrate toward opportunity, the ability to adapt to new environments, the capacity to maintain cultural traditions while embracing innovation, continue to shape human behavior today. We are still the wandering, adapting, creating species that first ventured beyond Africa's shores. As we stand at our own crossroads, facing challenges as daunting as any our ancestors encountered, we carry within us the same capacities that enabled them to transform the world. The epic journey continues. We are all still wanderers, still adapting, still becoming. Epilogue as we stand in the 21st century, looking back across the vast tapestry of human cultural evolution, we find ourselves at another threshold as momentous as any our ancestors faced. Just as those early humans once gazed across the Red Sea toward an unknown continent, we now look outward toward space, inward toward our own genes, and forward toward an artificial intelligence revolution that may reshape human consciousness itself. The same restless curiosity that drove our ancestors from African savannas to Arctic ice fields now propels us toward Mars and beyond. When astronauts aboard the International Space Station look down at Earth, they see the culmination of that ancient journey, every continent colonized, every major ecosystem inhabited, the blue planet wrapped in the lights of human civilization. Yet they also represent the beginning of humanity's next great expansion, carrying with them the same pioneering spirit that once enabled crossing impossible waters to reach Australia. The technologies enabling space exploration directly descend from innovations first developed by our ancient ancestors. The mathematical concepts Maya astronomers used to predict celestial cycles now guide spacecraft trajectories. The navigation skills Polynesian seafarers developed for crossing Pacific waters inform satellite positioning systems. The cooperative social structures Ice Age Europeans created for mammoth hunts provide models for international space missions requiring unprecedented coordination between nations and cultures. But perhaps the most profound parallel lies in the cognitive revolution occurring today. Just as our ancestors developed symbolic thinking and abstract reasoning 50,000 years ago, we are now creating artificial intelligences capable of processing information and making decisions in ways that may fundamentally alter human consciousness. The same capacity for symbolic manipulation that enabled cave art and complex languages now allows us to create digital worlds and virtual realities that exist only in collective imagination. The genetic research, revealing our ancient migrations, is also enabling us to consciously direct our own evolution for the first time in human history. CRISPR gene editing technology allows us to modify the same DNA sequences that record our species' journey across the globe. We can now eliminate genetic diseases that have plagued human populations since our ancestors first left Africa, potentially extending human lifespans and capabilities beyond anything previously possible. Yet this power brings unprecedented responsibilities. The same technologies that could eliminate suffering could also create new forms of inequality more profound than any in human history. If genetic enhancements become available only to the wealthy, we might see the emergence of biological castes that make historical social divisions seem trivial by comparison. The challenge we face is ensuring that the benefits of genetic technology serve all humanity rather than creating permanent biological hierarchies. Climate change presents perhaps the greatest test of our species' adaptive capabilities since the Ice Ages. Our ancestors survived dramatic climate shifts through technological innovation, social cooperation, and cultural flexibility. Today's climate crisis demands all these same capacities, but on a global scale that requires coordination between cultures that have been developing independently for tens of thousands of years. The solutions emerging from this challenge often draw directly on traditional knowledge preserved by indigenous populations. Australian Aboriginal fire management techniques are being scaled up to prevent megafires across entire continents. Traditional agricultural practices developed over millennia are being rediscovered as alternatives to industrial farming that degrades soil and reduces biodiversity. Ancient water management systems from arid regions are informing modern approaches to drought adaptation. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a preview of how modern global connectivity creates both vulnerabilities and opportunities that our ancestors never faced. The virus spread along the same trade networks and migration routes that have connected human populations for thousands of years. But modern transportation systems accelerated its transmission to speeds unprecedented in human history. Yet the same global connectivity that enabled the pandemic's spread also enabled scientific collaboration that developed vaccines in record time. The pandemic also revealed how deeply our modern social behaviors are rooted in ancient adaptive strategies. The tendency towards social distancing during disease outbreaks, the emphasis on small group loyalty during times of stress, and the spread of both accurate and inaccurate information through social networks all reflect behavioral patterns that helped our ancestors survive environmental and social challenges throughout human history. Digital technologies are creating new forms of cultural contact and synthesis that accelerate processes that once took thousands of years. Social media platforms enable cultural exchange and hybrid formation at unprecedented speeds, but follow the same basic patterns of cultural borrowing, adaptation, and synthesis that have characterized human societies throughout history. Online communities create virtual tribes that transcend geographic boundaries, similar to how ancient trade networks connected distant populations through shared interests and practices. The preservation of cultural diversity has become increasingly urgent as globalization threatens to homogenize human experience. Languages are disappearing at rates comparable to species extinction, taking with them unique ways of understanding the world and alternative solutions to universal human challenges. Digital archival projects are racing to preserve traditional knowledge systems before they vanish, creating virtual museums of human cultural achievement that could prove crucial for future challenges we cannot yet imagine. Artificial intelligence research is beginning to reveal how the cognitive innovations of our ancestors shaped modern human intelligence in ways we are only beginning to understand. Machine learning algorithms trained on human behavior patterns are discovering universal principles of cultural evolution that apply across all human societies. These insights are helping us understand both how cultures change and how they maintain stability across generations. The space exploration programs of multiple nations represent humanity's first truly cooperative effort to expand beyond Earth. The International Space Station requires the same kinds of resource sharing, conflict resolution, and cultural translation that enabled our ancestors to survive in challenging environments. As we plan missions to Mars and beyond, we are rediscovering the importance of social cohesion, cultural continuity, and adaptive flexibility that characterize successful migrations throughout human history. Perhaps most remarkably, the story of human cultural diversification is now being written in real time, with global audiences able to witness and participate in cultural evolution as it occurs. Social movements, technological innovations, and cultural trends can now spread across the planet within days or hours, creating new forms of collective consciousness that were impossible before digital communication technologies. As we face an uncertain future filled with challenges as daunting as any our ancestors encountered: climate change, technological disruption, social inequality, and the possibility of human extinction, we carry within us the same capacities that enabled them to transform the world. The creativity that produced cave art and complex languages now creates digital art and programming languages. The adaptability that enabled survival in every Earth environment now prepares us for life in space and underwater colonies. The social cooperation that enabled mammoth hunts now coordinates international responses to global crises. The next chapter of human cultural evolution is beginning to unfold. Whether we become a spacefaring civilization, merge with artificial intelligence, or adapt to a dramatically changed Earth, we remain the same restless, curious, endlessly creative species that once looked across the waters toward unknown continents and decided to build boats. The greatest journey in human history is not behind us, it is just beginning. We are all still wanderers, still adapting, still reaching toward horizons we can barely imagine. The epic continues, and we are writing it together.